Okay, cool. So we have Sebastian here. Sebastian is a familiar face in the DeSci ecosystem. He's an investor in Molecule. He's a big part of VitaDAO. I think he also sits on Molecule's board of directors. No, I lied. I take that back. He also, over the last 5 years, has co-founded 4 longevity biotech companies with a total equity value of over $6 million. So, that was entirely my fault. Sorry, guys. 600 million. Thanks for coming up. Yeah, here it is.
Yeah. All right. This is a beautiful weather day in Berlin. I'm happy to be here, and I was asked to start us off with my Donald Trump impression. Nobody loves Berlin like the Donald, believe me. In fact, I have a plan to make Berlin great again. We're going to rebuild that wall. All right. With that out of the way, I'll tell you about the DeSci. Oop, my slides are not showing. Is it possible to show them? Okay, cool. All right, so I'll tell you about the DeSci revolution, venture capital, and longevity biotech. So I'll tell you about my background, the technological stagnation hypothesis, some problems in the biomedical industry, glimmers of solutions, the DeSci vision, and give a shout out to LongBio, Prospera, and Vitalia. And if you like this, you can check out some of my other talks on YouTube for more details. So who am I? Sebastian Brunemeier. I look myself in the mirror every day and ask this question with tears in my eyes. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm a longevity scientist by training. I've been in the field over 10 years. I co-founded some prominent longevity companies and helped launch some venture funds. Today, I help run Healthspan Capital, as well as ImmuneAge Bio, working on rejuvenating the immune system, targeting your bone marrow. Here are some other organizations you should check out if you're interested in, well, you guys know Molecule, but if you're interested in the longevity space. Healthspan Capital. So I'm proud to say that we are the most active investors in the longevity biotech field. We've done about 30 deals in the last 2 years, and hopefully we will continue that pace. So here you can see some of the beautiful faces of the team, my partners. They've been at all of these prestigious institutions, et cetera. If you want to learn more, check out our website, healthspancapital.vc. Here are some of our portfolio companies. You can see them all on the website. And if you want to invest with us, you can invest through our angel list vehicle, and it's a minimum check size of $5K. So there you go, if you want to check it out online. Okay, so I think DeSci is the most important revolution yet. It liberates capital and technology from control of the corporation state. So this ties in with the technological stagnation hypothesis. So there's a great essay you should check out on the Founders Fund website. It's called What Happened to the Future? And it's summarized by Peter Thiel's quip, "We were promised flying cars and we got 140 characters. There's been an advancement in a narrow cone of progress of software, but not in the deep tech world of atoms." And so you can read that essay at your leisure. Here's another interesting podcast with the author Jay Storrs Hall on the Stranded Technologies podcast. It's my favorite podcast in the world by my friend Nicholas Anzinger. And he basically points out many of the ways in which bureaucracy and government actually stall innovation. We did an interview on the DeSci podcast with Nicholas Anzinger. You guys should all check it out. Okay, so why is it a problem to rely on the state to fund science? Why is it a problem to rely on the government to fund science? First of all, it's a monopoly. Monopolies tend to not do a good job at anything. But one of the other reasons is that within academia, there's this phenomenon of crowding out. So there are only so many smart people in the world that can really advance science, and if you stick them all in academic ivory towers, they kind of fight amongst each other, they give grants to each other to work on trivial things, and it doesn't really result in that much progress. And so you can check out the work of the author Terence Keeley for more on why we should separate state from science, just like we separated church from state. Here's another podcast with Terence on the Bitcoin Standard podcast. So there's a decline in confidence in institutions, so the media, the government, the military, et cetera. And this is kind of to the credit of the public because they're starting to learn history a bit. Mark Andreessen gave a shout out for this book, The Revolt of the Public, where he said, all over the world, elite institutions from governments to media to academia are losing their authority, a monopoly, control of information to the broader public. This book has been my #1 handout to anyone seeking to understand the unfolding shift in power from hierarchies to networks in the age of the internet. And this is actually published by Stripe Press. They've got a lot of good banned books on there. So another problem with state-funded science is this enforcement of dogma, this groupthink. And we'll get into that a bit later, but we saw some kind of crazy dogmas in the COVID era, like it was once verboten to say maybe COVID escaped from the Wuhan lab. And now even the US government is acknowledging that that was the likely outcome. So progress has slowed in other domains too, like travel speed. You can see here we actually flew faster with the Concorde and we undid that. Also, we were producing a lot more energy until around the 1970s when we fell off the Henry Adams curve and basically banned nuclear power. So progress has stalled in a lot of different domains, but the one that I'm most concerned with as a biotech guy is the cost and time to approve a drug. That's getting exponentially more expensive. So friend of DeSci, Jack Scannell, has pointed out that this has been occurring for a while, and he called it E-Room's law, and it's a widely used term throughout the industry, that it's getting exponentially more expensive and timely to get a new drug approved. Also, Big Pharma is burning their investors' capital. So on internal R&D, they're actually burning the capital because their rate of return is less than their cost of capital. So they're really inefficient at getting new drugs approved when they're doing the research themselves. But that's why they acquire external research, which creates a great opportunity for people like us in the startup world. So I'll briefly, gently critique academia, a place where I spent many years. So a lot of it is like LARPing, live action role play. You get papers published without real impact. It's a lot like the Catholic Church. You have these grandiose buildings, you have people with these capes and these weird outfits, and then you can see Nature, Science, and Cell, the journals, the sacred texts that they pray to. So it's not really safe for truth seekers anymore. People get canceled a lot for not subscribing to the dogma. And so I think we can do better. It also pushes out really radical thinkers who advance the field. So someone like Richard Feynman was a little bit of a wacky guy. He would not have survived long in the academia of today. So we want to allow faster, easier access to funding for the renegade academics and unpopular hypotheses. Every breakthrough is unpopular at first. Nobody believes it. There was this one case of a guy who got a Nobel Prize for proving that bacteria, H. pylori, can cause ulcers. Until he came around, everyone thought it was just stress. And to prove it, nobody believed him. He had to drink a solution of this H. pylori and give himself ulcers. He's an Australian. So they're a little wacky. Okay, so here's a case study of how this dogma can really be destructive, and it's the amyloid hypothesis of Alzheimer's disease. So there have been very few drugs approved for Alzheimer's in the last decades. There are some reasons. One, the central paradigm of what causes Alzheimer's is probably incorrect, and we'll get into that. So most drugs in Alzheimer's have failed, and it's because of this Alzheimer's hypothesis that was enforced as a dogma by this cabal of scientists. And there's a great article unpacking it in Stat News, the maddening saga of how an Alzheimer's cabal thwarted progress toward a cure for decades. So long story short, amyloid beta is present in a lot of Alzheimer's brains, but it may not be the causal upstream factor. That's like blaming the firefighters for the fire. And actually, there were some amyloid beta targeting drugs that were approved recently, but it turns out they don't work. And there was this probe by various agencies into the coziness, the closeness of corruption between the pharmaceutical sponsors of the drugs and the FDA. And actually, the commissioner of the FDA herself asked for that inquiry. Okay, so how might DeSci help? So you guys know DeSci. A definition that I generally use is DeSci is an open source movement to source, evaluate, fund, execute, and commercialize new research without reliance on governments, large corporations, or established institutions. While financial profit is often sought, money is not the primary mission. DeSci aims to restructure the legal and financial foundations of science commercialization. So you can see some of these organizations many of you are members of. Our BioXYZ comrades have started a bunch of these BioDAOs recently. VitaDAO is the one that's closest to my heart that I've been working with for the longest. And I'll get into longevity now. So Big Pharma is historically asleep at the wheel. So according to Jürgen Drews, the head of R&D at Roche, which is one of the most sophisticated big pharmas in the world in Switzerland, he said, biotech is taking up what pharma is neglecting, attacking the root causes of disease. And I would argue that there's nothing more at the root cause of disease than aging itself. David Baltimore, the president of Caltech and a Nobel laureate, said regarding the biotech revolution in the 90s, pharma was asleep at the wheel, unable to understand the profound opportunities of molecular biology and unable to take advantage of them. And that gave rise to companies like Genentech, one of the best performing investments in all of biotech. So let's get into longevity as the apotheosis of medicine. So some bad news is we're all aging and it's an exponential function. So even if we cured cancer in the whole population tomorrow, every type of cancer, on a population level, we would only get 3 to 5 years of extended healthy lifespan before something else would kill us. So to resolve the problems that are faced by government budgets and global demographic aging, we need to target the root cause, aging itself. And I would also submit that demographic aging is the most important problem facing the world. It's not climate change, it's not Russia or China or whatever. It's actually aging and disease which causes the most suffering, and it's 100% guaranteed. So the goal is to extend the period of healthy life by slowing the aging process. This is called health span. We can do this in animals pretty effectively. We can extend their lifespan over 50% in the lab because we understand the underlying molecular biology of aging pretty well, actually. Here's some of the mechanisms behind it. And we know there's out of date, probably 50 to 100 interventions that extend lifespan in mice and many other species. So part of my job is to translate this research in the lab into the clinic. Some of the favorite interventions and their quantum of lifespan extension shown here. I'm very partial to heterochronic bone marrow transplant, young bone marrow into an old person. Here's an example of one of these drugs, one of these interventions. So you can see on the left, you've got a mouse that has not received this longevity drug, and on the right, a mouse that is its litter mate, its brother, that has received that drug. And we know of many drugs that do this. Here are some of the smart cookies who are in the space, the social proof slide. Teal Bology is a big one, Vitalik, you guys know a lot of these names. So we have pretty clever people backing us now. There's exponential growth in the field, companies calling themselves long bio companies, even though a lot of these companies don't qualify by our strict criteria. If you want to know more, you go to longevitylist.com, run by my colleague Nathan Chang, that keeps track of all of the companies and job postings in the space. Here are some of the investors and company builders in the space. This is not a complete list, they're growing. Here's some of the companies publicly listed and privately held that are in the space. This is also incomplete. Go to longevitylist.com for more. Also, you can join a political movement called Vitalism. I just came from a conference in Valencia about vitalism, and I often say that there is a religion-shaped hole in the human psyche that people try to fill with something, you know, a sense of purpose and meaning and community. And in a secularizing world with less religion, we're actually filling it with bad stuff. So we're filling it with consumerism or nationalism or whatever. So let's actually give people something healthy to put in that hole in their brain, and I put forward vitalism. Okay, so some notes on medical freedom here. So if you only read a couple books this year, these are the books that you absolutely must read, believe me. They're incredible, tremendous books, tremendous. You've got The Network State by Bology, Sovereign Individual, which Peter Thiel wrote the foreword to, and The Art of the Deal. So, startup societies. This is probably not new to most of you, but you should check out Nicholas Anzinger's list of these new institutions, new ways to govern ourselves without relying on states. And so why is it urgent that we need to escape from government control? Governments are becoming more authoritarian, central bank digital currencies, taxes, inflation, lockdown, etc. You can try to cast a little piece of paper and hope that they listen to you, or you can vote with your feet and go to greener pastures, almost like escaping or defecting the Soviet Union. So people with means are moving right now. They're going to a certain type of place, and these are places that have political stability, low taxes, good weather, etc. And we should probably choose a certain number of these places to rally our forces, and then eventually we can have political influence in some of those locations. There's a very strong correlation between economic freedom and personal freedom and prosperity. Okay, so a brief word on FDA. I have a whole presentation on this, but we'll save that for another day. I'll just suffice to say, TJ, my favorite founding father, said, was the government to prescribe to us our medicine and diet, our bodies would be in such keeping as our souls are now. Wow. And in America, we spend like 4 times more than the closest country on healthcare, and we're like 40th in the rankings, and actually our life expectancy is declining. So something is really wrong with the system. We can get to that later. So I'll give a shout out to Prospera. Prospera is one of the most advanced, or the most advanced, startup cities in the world in the Caribbean. We did some events down there that were pretty successful. You can see it's this beautiful location on a tropical island. Roatan is just off the coast of Honduras. It's pretty easy to access. It's a major scuba diving location, actually. It's the largest reef other than the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. So we're doing various advanced therapies down there already. You can see some of the shots, some new buildings being built. Here's the master plan for this futuristic city. We have a regenerative medicine clinic down there that's been operating for many years. It's run by Glenn Terry, who's a very prominent orthopedic surgeon. He was on the board of the Olympics Medical Committee, so the sports event. He was one of the chief doctors there. Okay, so throughout history, we've had a bunch of different forms of governance, colonies, autocracy, democracy, etc. And there's a new one, which is sovereign individuals or something like that. And they're going to places like Prospera or Dubai or Singapore to get more freedom, economic and otherwise. And you can see the evolution of various forms of government, and they all have one thing in common, which is less state power. It is protecting the individual from the state, from the collective. And the state, the government, is not us. We are not the state. We are not the government. The state is a monopoly on violence of men with guns who try to convince everybody that we are them. Anyway, enough for my anarchist lecturing. So the dawn of the free private cities movement is equivalent to the US Constitution, a model the world will copy, causing a revolution in human freedom and flourishing. Check out this conference, Liberty in Our Lifetime, this winter, coming up. It's got a lot of cool people talking about this kind of stuff. Another thing I'll give a shout out to, which is completely random, well, not completely. The first country that clones geniuses is going to take over the world within a generation or two, because intelligence is highly heritable. And imagine if you had 1,000 Einsteins or von Neumanns and they were working together, or you took the Manhattan Project scientists and cloned them, that country would take over. And I've spoken with some US government folks who actually see this as an issue of national security, because the Chinese have been the first to clone primates, and they have a very sophisticated cognitive genomics program. All right, so to conclude the visions for DeSci, you've got these layers of DeSci. Shout out to Nicholas for this format. Some of the dreams for the future. So fully automated luxury cloud labs. As a scientist who's been pipetting late nights, it's just a waste of time and energy. So we can automate a lot more. We can make it seamless to launch companies. Good ideas get funded regardless of dogma, etc. So DeSci brings the computer revolution to the world of atoms, just as the printing press did during the Protestant Reformation. And we can disintermediate science. We can take a little bit of the influence of government, the state, and the big corporations, and their groupthink and dogma out of the program. Okay, so, and it's too late to put the cat back in the bag here. So now that this idea is out here, you can't kill an idea like this, especially with all these crypto people behind it. So with that, thank you very much for your attention.